Well, I must say, following Coke's 125-year anniversary and Facebook's billions and billions of likes is very cruel and unusual punishment, but we'll see how we do.
It's going to get worse. We've been talking about... Sorry, I have to put this question. We've been talking about the networking of brands, how quickly you can distribute information, how quickly you can build an audience and talk to them. Obviously, that works in a very positive way, and it can also work in an incredibly negative way. I won't push too hard, but Nestle obviously had some issues, as many large companies did with Greenpeace, and there were a few social media mistakes that you may wish to just explain to the audience. Can you tell us, since that happened last year, what's changed and what lessons you've learned as a brand?
Yeah, well, I just started this job as global head of digital and social media about 2 months ago. Moved out from Cincinnati to literally right down the street. So I don't have, all the details of how everything played out because I wasn't necessarily inside the building. As a social media commentator, as an ad age columnist and the like, I certainly, had my perspective, like many of you, on, I think there were good learnings for all companies that, are subject to new rules of transparency. It's not just managing the conversation, but it's also recognizing that in a social media world, the brand is opening up. And, if there are issues that detractors have issues with, if your product's not measuring up to quality, if you are putting out ad claims that don't measure up to the reality, we're all going to be held to a higher standard. And I think a confluence of those things happened. I think that, looking forward, our big challenge is to really figure out how do we begin to enter the conversation at many, many levels, corporate, brands. I mean, Nestle is a company of many brands, from San Pellegrino to Gerber, and so many, many different learning opportunities. But, I think one of the, I published a book a couple years ago called Satisfied Customers Tell 3 Friends, Angry Customers Tell 3,000, and I talk about this notion of the 6 drivers of brand credibility: trust, transparency, authenticity, listening, responsiveness, and affirmation. Affirmation is if you type in your brand in Google or Wikipedia, either you're affirmed or you're not. And these are the new rules of brand building, and it's important to keep in mind because I do think that a lot of our conferences tend to be kind of over-embellish the positive side, but it's pretty hard to manage community. It takes a lot of work. You really have to think through the resource question. I was very pleased to see the method that Coke put behind, the global site. I mean, this isn't just let's create a fan page and see what happens. I mean, the same discipline of offline branding needs to carry over into the social media space. And if we do that right, we'll get big dividends.
And part of that is your particular role, which you can explain to our delegates here, is the reporting structure that you have, which is probably quite unusual.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an experiment because typically when you're doing digital or social media, you'll either be a straight up line to marketing or maybe to corporate affairs. In my particular case, I actually am reporting to Nestle's equivalent of the global CMO as well as the global head of corporate communications. And it's an unproven experiment, but I think it's a recognition that social media and digital is fundamentally breaking down silos. And I dare say that most of us are going to be looking at fundamentally different organizational structures as the social media dust falls. The one thing that I found, having founded a social media monitoring business that was ultimately acquired by Nielsen, is that we sold to so many different customers. We started with the quality group, then it was marketing, then the sales group, then the engineers, then the market research insights. And we're dealing with a medium that fundamentally touches every single organizational silo. And for companies that are slow to wake up, that's a big threat. For companies that who can kind of move relatively fast, that's a massive opportunity. And those are some of the things that we're trying to tackle in this new role.
So in terms of breaking down those silos, then, apart from your reporting structure, you have a very definite way that you build brands within Nestle, brand building the Nestle way, I think is what you call it. Can you explain how social then is actually being integrated into that so it's not siloed? Yeah,
well, I think the most important thing with digital and social, and I had a earlier run at this with the large CPG company before I arrived here, is to really start with the foundations. And the one thing that's been great about Nestle, I think they have a very disciplined brand building philosophy. It's called Building Brands the Nestle Way, and there are kind of different components of the brand building house, like creating engaging brand experiences, win with shoppers, know your consumers deeply. And I think that if you're architecting a digital or social roadmap, you first want to ask yourself, how does what I'm doing fundamentally apply to those basic fundamentals? And you think about, creating great, engaging brand experiences. I mean, everything we heard from Carolyn about the Facebook experience, really satisfies that particular goal. Win with shoppers. I mean, boy, it's mind-boggling how many of the apps that have been downloaded, whether it's the Android or the Apple platform, are fundamentally about making life simpler, more convenient, easier for shoppers. And so if we take all these disparate elements from the digital and social space and kind of look at them relative to our core fundamentals, we're actually going to see some very important connections. And I think the biggest mistake that we make in digital is that we come out of a silo, it's in a vacuum, we jump too quickly for the big experiment, but I think we'll find ourselves moving much quicker. The most popular Ad Age article I wrote last week, measured by links and shares or likes or whatever you call it, was called Marketers, Let's Get Back to Boring. And I basically argued, listen, we can move digital and social much faster if we just take a fresh look at our core fundamentals. I mean, we're talking about listening today as though it's something fundamentally new. When I first started in CPG, that was lesson number one. Even things like TV, I think, I don't buy this argument that digital versus TV. I think in a world of paid, owned, earned media, the issue, and I think we saw this well illustrated with the Coke promotions, how do we, generate earn from TV? Now, we may have to think differently about TV copy as something that brings a shareable story that manifests itself well in social media. But at the end of the day, the principle of sight, sound, and motion, connecting emotionally with consumers, is very, very powerful, and we need to make those critical connections if we really want to move the agenda forward in this space.
Picking up on something that Carolyn said, just as an aside, but I think is actually quite an interesting point. Is we invite
many interesting points.
Well, we invite many of you to come to our offices, and I'm sure that Nestle is more than welcome in the Facebook office as well. It points to a different way that brands and social platforms are interacting, not necessarily always through a media agency, and your role itself isn't one that's replicated in every brand at the moment. So some brands are leaning harder on their agency for social media. What does Nestle want from a media agency with regards to social support?
I mean, the first answer is don't know yet. I mean, 2 months into the job, and we are looking at, haven't traveled as much as Carolyn, but I've been to 7 different countries and really studied met with a lot of the agency folks. But I would say this, the one thing I would like to see from the agencies is, we've talked a lot about, paid, owned, earned, and I think everyone's fundamentally bought into it. I think where we need to go now is to really get it into a tangible model. I wrote a paper last year for the Advertising Research Foundation called Media Mix Modeling 2.0. And I think that's what we need. We now need to we've got great data. We can actually look at the correlation between TV and conversation. We know enough about the role of customer service in driving meaningful, high trustworthy conversation that actually has media value. What I want to see is a more aggressive effort to say, hey, there's a whole different way of buying and selling media. And in some cases, we may take a slice off of paid media and put it into customer service, but really thinking about how that whole ecosystem works. I think we're at the point where we can get beyond the theoretical to really building powerful models. And I don't want to take away, I'm sure many of you are doing amazing things on that front, but it really hasn't emerged as an industry standard. And that's one of the things that I'll be looking for. Because at the end of the day, as I serve as a consultant to brands, I'm going to be trying to help them make very smart, informed choices based on available data. And if I can say, hey, listen, you can get a bigger social dividend by mixing your paid and your own media a bit, that's what they're going to be looking for.
That's cool. I think I'd quite like Carolyn and Michael to come back actually join us now, just picking up on that point. And I'm sure you guys, if you've got some questions ready, if we can have some roving mics around. I'll kick off with one, but then if you stick your hand up in the air and the microphone will find you, that'd be great. Come sit here, Karen. To that point that Pete was just making there, actually, Michael, was a question to something that you said. Do you believe that Coke can truly achieve marketing in a non-big brand way? If I close my eyes, I can hear the jingle bells, see the trucks driving through the snow, and, and see Father Christmas giving me a Coca-Cola. Do you think it's an achievable thing to do for such a huge brand, such as Coke or Nestle, to market in a non-big brand way?
Only as part of a holistically integrated plan, and much of it is in a big brand way. The point I was trying to make was that in social spaces, our success has come primarily from acting as a non-big brand and recognizing the consumers were there first. So really in spending the majority of our efforts in celebrating what they're there for. But there will always be all kinds of other media, and there will always be massive reach on television and out of home, and that's the point I was trying to make, is the conference and the convergence, I guess, of all of them. So
it's not an either-or, it's
no.
a holistic approach.
I think on that point, I think the biggest challenge is being adaptive. Because I think that with big brands, we're so used to the plan that's kind of primed well in advance, and now we're in this medium where we do have to sense and respond. And it's not like you totally change the campaign or throw it away, but you're adaptive. And you're constantly optimizing. I've seen it on your site. I see it all over Facebook. And I think actually, even at Nestle, we're really starting to learn through that iteration cycle. But that's a new learning for a big company. It's much easier. Like when I did a startup, I mean, you could do anything very, very fast, and you were the boss. But in larger organizations where more rules prevail and legacy, often rules, it's much harder.
Okay.
I was going to comment on that optimization. I was literally just looking. Skype, no surprise, is trending incredibly right now. And hats off to those from Skype because they're buying that promoted tweet. So while everyone's talking about them, they're buying them and directing them directly there. That's something that not a lot of marketers are doing yet.
Smart thinking. Got any questions in the audience at all for any of these guys? Can you just say your name and where you're from first, please?
I don't know how you see the hand. I don't see
And
that.
also if you've got a battery in your pocket, possibly. Run, Sarah, run. Do we have any other questions? Have we only got one microphone?
Well, I have a response to what you just raised. I think one of the other questions that we need to explore carefully, and I was at Nielsen, so I saw the Facebook ad model is powerful at so many different levels. But even in the context of Twitter, I think one of the things that we're going to have to ask ourselves is when we start to marry the word of mouth with promotion or with paid media, do we begin to see what we used to call, in my first year in marketing, is like almost a wear-out analysis? Is there something that potentially erodes the significance of the message when, in fact, we know it's, influenced by advertising? And I don't know the answer to it, but I think we're going to have to be very sensitive to it. It's no different than the question that we're asking in word-of-mouth circles, where if there's a zillion word-of-mouth agencies out there trying to prop up the conversation, at what point does it cease to become effective with consumers? And I think this is a question we should ask ourselves relentlessly.
So it's what's true
Well, we're all preaching the gospel of authenticity, so we have to, almost to be true to our own speeches and presentations, I think we're going to have to really put that to the torture test.
One to keep in mind. I think we'll just take a question. Sir, can you say who you are and where you're from, please?
My name is Roberto Grossman. I'm from FBs in Brazil. My question is for all the panel is about the industry model having different planning, creative, and media agencies, if that doesn't make it harder to have a digital and social strategy.
Go ahead, take that, Karen.
I personally think, and I've been fairly vocal about this, I think the current siloed model that certain agencies still operate in is actually going to quickly die, because the truth is that, and I don't remember who said it, I think Brian or Dan may have said it, we cannot be thinking in silos of creative planning, media buying, TV, print, digital, and then some people put a social piece to that. That is just the wrong way to think about it. It's got to be holistic. The consumer has to be at the center. And depending on how you use all of the mediums, you need a really cross-functional team at the table. It's the same thing, by the way, on the publisher side. If I put myself in that bucket, we can't just show up to meetings with salespeople, right? It's just, it does not work. And frankly, they should be the last people, other than the relationship, building part. We've got to bring the engineers, the product, the marketing, the people that understand how to get the insights, out of our product. And agencies, I think, have to totally rethink the way they're structured, and the ones that are the most progressive are doing that.
To that point, and something that Carolyn said I want to throw to you guys, better to be done than perfect. I thought it was a really interesting comment. Doesn't sit very well necessarily with traditional media world. What do you guys think? Better to be done than perfect?
Well,
Better be to be done and out.
I'd rather take a crack at his question, because I think that, I don't know what the answer to this, but on his question, don't tweet the fact that I rejected his question. No, but I think it's, listen, I think social is bringing kind of healthy, kind of, I don't know if creative destruction is the right word, but to Carolyn's point, at the end of social, I don't even know if the word's going to be relevant in a year, but it's fundamentally about the consumer. The consumer voice, the consumer expression. We're kind of replanting the consumer in the center, and I think that is driving a lot of agency realignment. I mean, I think the good thing is that social is actually helping everyone to discover these common bonds that actually didn't exist before. At some point, it will require hard choices, because I don't think the advertisers are going to do a relationship with the whole Noah's Ark of vendors. And so the opportunities, how do you really drive that meaningful synergy?
I would quickly answer both so that I don't skirt any questions. Yeah. But the first one is to only add to what Carolyn said is, I would say rather than will die, frankly, in many cases, it's dying a very fast death and has died already. We've got some terrific partners that are working incredibly seamlessly together, as well as advertisers, to make the stuff work. And then as far as perfect, I wouldn't go so far as to say perfect, but I would remind us that in some cases, the fishbowl that we live in sometimes makes it far more to lose than there is to gain. So, you do have to get it right. There's incredible expectations from consumers, but even higher expectations from those in the business about what you do, and you very often never hear the end of it.
Well, this is where the listening piece is so important, because if you want to really, buy your insurance, just listen to what consumers are saying, and you won't necessarily be surprised. And again, things like the gap between an ad claim and the reality is one of the most viral topics online. And it's very important for all brands to understand where consumers don't buy our messaging, and why, and really build that into, the way we think about building a community or a Facebook fan page and the like.
Any more questions from the floor, please? Hands in the air.
There's got to be questions.
Yeah, there's movement over here. And your name, sir, and where you're from first.
Thank you. Nick Loria from Social Vibe.
Hello,
Carolyn.
Hi, Nick.
General question. I'm interested in hearing your opinions about how the current ecosystem of CPM and impressions needs to change regarding everything that was said today. Cost per engagement, different ways of buying and transacting media. Because it seems to me that the current system is pretty archaic.
I'll start. We believe the current system is archaic. Some of the best deals we have with American Express, Walmart, Procter, you name the top advertisers, are the deals where we literally sit around the table, we figure out how we're going to transform what we're doing, and then everyone sort of looks at each other and says, well, who's paying for what? And how do we pay for that? Those are the best deals. Those are the deals that, yes, there's money exchange and there's a business relationship, but we're not like coming in to hawk media impressions. The truth is, you can all buy billions of impressions every single day, every single split second. So I don't want to be in the business of hawking CPMs and impressions. I want to be in the business of actually trying to sit down and say, what does it really mean when you put the consumer at the center and reorganize your business? And for that, I actually don't even know what the right metric is, but I do think we have to move beyond where we currently are.
I think impressions are actually okay as a label. I think we just need to recognize that at the end of the day, we want to maximize favorable impressions for our brands, but we need to recognize that we can get them from different sources. We can earn or cultivate or nurture them, and that requires real choices, investing in business operations and investing in employees that really, make you want to talk about the brand and the like. And then there's the paid side. And in fact, I think you can almost do apples to apples comparisons where like a word of mouth impression relative to a paid media one. I almost think we need to kind of keep them all relatively consistent as we figure out which, brings more value to the equation or what's the ultimate synergy.
The only thing I'd add is I think the sooner we get to some more common language and some agreement as to what that equation is, the better. You know,
No
and
more
that's
buzzwords.
that's taken us, 15 years in just digital, tradigital to get to common language and to speak to marketers and marketing speak, not about hits and clicks and page views. And now that we finally have gotten there, we need to do that much quicker in social and interactive television and more interactive spaces.
Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there, guys. These chaps are going to be with us for the rest of the day. Yes? Excellent. Please find them, ask them questions, have a chat, buy them a drink, dinner, lunch, whatever.
Follow us.
And so if you can just show your appreciation, please, from Karen Everson from Facebook, Pete Blackshaw from Nestle, and Michael Donnelly from Coca-Cola. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Karen.